My son name is Jalen Sturdivant Lee. He's currently 13. He is autistic, but he is the most lovable, sweet, helpful kid. He's just a big old teddy bear. And so one day he came home and I was in the kitchen cooking. And he came to me and he said, I don't like the way that the floor tastes. And so it's kind of like, huh? Like, what do you mean? He said, I was in school and they made me taste the floor. So I'm just kind of like, okay, what, does he know what he's talking? Like, what's like, I was just kind of confused. I hadn't received an email. I hadn't received any information about anything happening at the school. So I was kind of like blown away. And so I said, show me what happened to you in school. And so he put himself on the floor in the living room in a prone position. And he said it felt like somebody had their foot or their knee in the back of his neck and he could barely breathe and he was tasting the floor.
My experience with seclusion in school is very personal. When I was between the ages of like 7 to 10, I had a lot of meltdowns at my elementary school. And those were the times where I was secluded and or restrained in school. It wasn't known at the time that I had autism. I just remember being in this really dark room. It wasn't a space that I think was safe for putting a like 7 to 10-year-old in. I realized like how dangerous that may have been for them to do that to me. Like they didn't even have somebody sitting with me in the room to make sure I wouldn't hurt myself. They turned the lights off and I remember just always like being alone for like hours. I was like, wow, like how can they do that to a young little kid?
I was I always want to say a victim. I was a victim of seclusion and restraint throughout my childhood, so which started in elementary school, and I was very little. Um, and I always feel like that was a turning point in my life where things started to go downhill, and it became a cycle. I remember when the first time that it happened, I was embarrassed. I was frustrated. I was angry. I had obviously, gone into freeze mode, and I don't know, didn't really know what else to do, but just shut down. Um, and I remember that, and I also remember like having then a sense of dread, like about school, about the teacher, about my classmates who saw me, dragged out as this little kid.
When I was in kindergarten and first grade, I didn't feel safe at school. Not at all. Well, for a lot of reasons. Well, for one, I hated the teachers because they were really mean to me. They secluded me, restrained me.
I know from personal experience that it does great harm to children, and not just any children. Our most vulnerable children, our youngest children, are children who are living with disabilities that affect their ability to handle the situations, the demands of school.
Frank has been secluded and restrained more times than I probably can count or remember. It is at least a couple of times a week, at least 2 or 3 times a week. If not daily, some weeks. As a mother, I take it very, very personally when you have to put your hands on my child because I don't have to put my hands on my child. I don't understand it. I never understand how it gets to that level when they do that to him.
I was picturing he's in a sensory room. So I kept getting these notes home. He went to the time away room. He went to the time away room. This happened 100 times, over 100 times between the beginning of school, his first grade year, and Christmas break. And I later realized that the sensory room that I was picturing was not the sensory room I was picturing. This whole time, I thought he was in a sensory gym with swings with someone helping him. He was in a closet. They were keeping my 6-year-old first grader in this jail cell.
When I first heard that my son had been restrained and physically transported to a seclusion room, I was horrified. The school never notified me, and the reason they said was because they assumed my son would tell me. And obviously that's ludicrous based on the fact that he's a child and he thought he was in trouble. That went on for weeks.
So being secluded and restrained, especially so early, definitely affected my ability to trust adults, all adults, teachers, professionals, and be in school. School was the most unsafe place for me to be in my entire life. And that never went away.
It's horrible, and it doesn't work.
It had such a traumatic impact on him where I had to put him in therapy. Not only did I have to put him in therapy after being restrained, he didn't want to go back to school. He didn't trust people. And so I had to end up pulling him out of school, and he had to do online for almost 3 years. So that's 3 years of not really interacting with other children, peers and stuff like that. And it really put him behind. Although he was getting work, it just wasn't the same as being inside the school, getting the lessons that he needed. He didn't want to leave my sight. He didn't want me to leave him. And he was scared of people that didn't look like him. And that came out of his mouth.
Seclusion and restraint's traumatizing. It's very traumatizing to anybody, those doing it, those involved, mostly the receiver, because they're the ones out of control.
You would think I'd be more capable of talking about without the emotion because it started so long ago, but it's almost like you relive it. Hold on. It's like you're there. With all the feelings. Hold on. Okay, give me a second.
It was traumatic. It was very, very, very traumatic for him. So it was a very, very stressful for me as a mother to try to explain to him the best way I could that not everyone is bad.
All I can see for people that have no idea what seclusion and restraint is that I pray that you never, ever experience that. And I pray that no one you know and love ever experiences it. Because it is one of the worst feelings in the world to watch something you created and has fought so hard to be there in the first place, because it takes a lot for him to even get up and make it out of the home. For him to be able to walk into a school and still face that, knowing that he might be held down for hours or held into a closet for hours, and still goes and still does what they ask. I hope you never, ever, ever experience that.
I think my biggest regret as a parent is not pulling him out of that school sooner. I didn't listen to my gut when it told me something was wrong. I didn't believe my son. I believed the adults, and I didn't believe my son. And he's still dealing with the trauma because of that. He's 11. It's been 5 or 6 years. And for several years, he couldn't go to school. I had to quit working. I homeschooled him for several years.
Several of my families that I've worked with, because they couldn't come to an agreement with the school, and don't have the means or the time or the energy to sue, right, and to go this really legalistic way to problem solve through it, end up doing some sort of homeschooling process, some way to meet their students' needs on their own terms so they can get an education without trauma.
The only thing I can remember is that it was really, really uncomfortable and really, really awful.
I was never violent, but yet I ended up being slammed to the floor hundreds of times, in my life, for being loud, for rolling my eyes, for not moving quick enough.
Throwing them in a room, secluding them, or pitting them down on the floor and putting your foot or your knee in the back. What kind of behavior do you think you're going to get from that? They're going to resist that. They're not going to be happy-go-lucky, smiling, and, okay, I'm going to be the best kiddo ever. No, you're going to get resistance with that.
Being autistic myself, meltdowns are not intentional. No autistic person wants to have a meltdown. It's not fun. It's not something that, we just choose to do because we're feeling in the mood for it. No, it's
Just imagine going to school. You're a little kid and your kids love school in the beginning, right? And going to school, you're all happy go, like you have an incident with another student, or you decide you don't want to do something and you act out, and you're shuffled away to this room and isolated from your peers. And it's embarrassing, it's painful, I don't understand why I have to be in this space.
There's nothing more harmful than ostracizing kids, which we do all the time. One is seclusion, or sending them to the office. It's that sense of you don't fit in here. And that's not valuing and caring. It's communicating and reinforcing to many kids that there really is something wrong with me.
I started avoiding school, either being sick. When I got a little bit older, I'd go to the bus stop and loop back around and come home, because it was just really a hard place for me to be. And I think it's unfortunate nobody wondered why. Like nobody wondered why I couldn't be there, or I didn't want to be there, or I didn't feel safe there.
What makes you want to keep going to school after that? Is that how we want our schools to look and feel? Like, it shouldn't even exist that there's a space that can happen, right? I mean, how can you trust a person who puts you in seclusion regularly? How do you, just as human beings, we don't trust people who continually harm us?
Then growing up as a state ward, and living mostly in residential places, because I wouldn't go to school, or I was still avoiding school, and that was difficult. So I stayed mostly in group residential facilities, where I was restrained a ridiculous amount.
The impact that it had on myself was I didn't trust anyone. So it was hard for me to get my son to trust the system that I didn't trust. So homeschooling was the best thing for me because my anxiety level was through the roof. So how do you explain to your child to trust the system that you don't even trust?
I've had to stop working currently because of schooling. Their answer to keeping him in school was me. So that was calling me, 15, 20 times a day. That is having me actually come in and come talk to him or leave with him. And you can't do that. You cannot work and me be his every minute solution all day too.
It's just simply bad, dangerous practice. Like, I don't know how many times people have to, it's dangerous.
It just defies logic that continuing to brutalize people who can't manage themselves will somehow make them able to do that and will make the people doing the brutalizing safer.
It's not working. That's not the proper thing to do. Seclusion and restraint is not the proper way to get things done.
I think it's fairly clear that what we're doing is not working because the amount of seclusion and restraints are going up, which indicates to me that adults don't have enough tools to manage what they need to manage. This is just not a sustainable model. We're damaging a generation of children.
This was all 30 years ago. And I still feel this deeply about something that people did to me 30 years. Out of love, out of concern.
As a 33-year-old woman with autism, I did not realize that seclusion and restraint was still happening in Michigan schools, and especially at the rate that it's happening. I just always assumed that what happened to me as a child was a little archaic. I assumed that nobody would still be, obviously no one would still lock a child up in a closet, but here we are today. It really just boggles my mind that it's still happening.
I had assumed after they killed somebody that people stopped doing it. Like that people stopped secluding and restraining people, until I was watching a local school board meeting and I saw them asking for money in the budget to build a seclusion room at our magnet school. And I was like, what? Like they still do that?
So the question of, can a school be trauma-informed and still use seclusion and restraint? No. All right. To be a trauma-informed organization and trauma-informed school is to create safety. It's to empower children. It's to walk alongside them and give them strategies and opportunities to heal, develop, not to trigger them into that potential flip of fight, flight, or freeze.
I don't know that there are other workplaces that people are allowed to assault people who don't follow their directions. I think there are other ways to manage behavior without assaulting children.
I think people in Michigan don't realize that children as young as 4 and 5 are secluded and restrained. I think they don't realize that children who are cognitively impaired or children on the autism spectrum or any other disability are isolated sometimes for hours alone.
The lack of empathy is the biggest concern I have when it comes to seclusion and restraint with especially support staff. I don't want to throw them under the bus, but the level of training they get is not okay. It is not okay for what we put these people in for $12 an hour.
They're so low with staff that they literally just throw anybody in the classroom with the kids in the special education. No, it's called special education for a reason. That means they need proper training to deal with our kiddos. And sometimes you're not getting that.
Teachers are human, but in that humanness, how do we as administrators, as people in the community, to support teachers, to help them get the support necessary so they don't move into that fight, flight, or freeze as well?
It is really unfortunate that for decades we've been teaching the people who work with our most difficult kids, in schools included, what to do as kids are becoming or are already escalated. We've been teaching those caregivers how to de-escalate and restrain kids. The bad news is that that's crisis management. We've been told that that's crisis prevention, but it's not. It's crisis management that occurs very late in a sequence of events that begins with an expectation that a child is having difficulty meeting. Then comes the kid's concerning behavior. Then we're de-escalating, and then if de-escalating doesn't get the job done, we are restraining or secluding. What that says is that we've been late a lot, and we've been teaching educators what to do when it's already late.
Many of those seclusions and restraints are the same child over and over again. Many of those seclusions and restraints have the same starting point, probably 10 minutes before we get to the point where a child and teacher are out of control.
We really have to shift our mindsets and be thinking more about what, we always talk about behavior as communication, but we don't actually create behavioral intervention plans that really get at the heart of what the students' needs are, and what they're needing is still not addressed.
Fortunately, the expectations kids are having difficulty meeting, we call them unsolved problems, can be identified proactively, can be solved proactively. Because there are a lot of them, we're not going to be able to solve them all at once, so we're going to need to put some on hold proactively. Technology for being early, true crisis prevention exists. That's what we need to be teaching educators who work with our most vulnerable kids how to do.
I don't think that educators don't want to. I think they don't always know how to, and they're not given the freedom to actually take that time to work with students in this way.
I know there's a better way. I've been introduced to this better way, and it actually makes life better for everyone. And I'm so passionate about it because I want everybody to know about this. I want everybody to know that this doesn't have to happen.
Why aren't schools set up to really meet students where they're at instead of this one-size-fits-all model? And we really just need education on those other ways and training, and which means funding for that purpose. What we're seeing in schools is more paperwork being done, more keeping track of things, but not necessarily this sense of, well, we're not allowed to do it anymore. We just have to follow the rules around it. And so they're not really looking for alternatives to seclusion and restraint as much as let's do it properly.
There was a research study done about 10 years ago that looked at 22 restraints across the country where kids died. And what they found in those 22 restraints where kids died is that every single one of them said it was because of safety. Yet, when they looked through all the records, every single one of those was because of oppositional and defiant behavior.
Okay, so Michigan, I love Michigan. Michigan is where my friends and family are. Michigan is where I went to school. Michigan is where I taught for 10 years. Michigan is an amazing place. It's full of excellent educators who are extremely dedicated to their students. They're wonderful people. And in Michigan, seclusion and restraint are used 125 times per day on average. That's from the 2022-23 self-reported data from schools. Self-reported, so we know it's actually higher. None of my son's seclusions or restraints were ever reported to the state. 93% of these are students with known disabilities. Seclusion and restraint were used 22,000 times in the 2022-23 school year. So we have an extremely severe problem in Michigan. In Michigan, we've had students who were killed in restraints by trained professionals.
And so I'm hoping that somebody light bulb would pop on that would say, you know what, this is a problem. And we need to really check into this. We really need to do something because it's really only hurting the kiddos.
Well, I would like to see in Michigan schools with regards to seclusion restraint, let's remove this as an option and put in place some other programs that schools could adopt. Some funding towards the training, right, needs to happen. You can't have an unfunded mandate.
A reasonable step down over, maybe 3 years to get to zero seclusion and restraints throughout Michigan is feasible. And I think it begins with training. I think it begins with a paradigm shift. I think it begins with adult professionals realizing that when I have to assault a child somewhere, something has gone wrong, and the onus is on me as an adult to figure out where that went wrong and to work towards correcting it.
Who's listening? Like, who can do something? Who can change something? Who can really change this system up? That's what I want to know. Who cares about our children? Is there anybody out there in Michigan that care about our children? Or is it that they don't care because it doesn't affect them directly with their children?
I think we can do this. I think we can eliminate seclusion and restraint in Michigan.